Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we're going to begin the funeral services of Mr. Richard J. Sorman. We welcome those of you who are here and those of you who are online. Rabbi Michael Sommer from Har Shalom will be officiating this afternoon. Gentle reminder, please be sure that your cell phones have been turned off.
The act of Kriya.
Speak into the mic.
The act of Kriya is as old as biblical times. When a loved one died, they would tear their clothing and pour ash upon their head. The act has come forward to a ribbon that a mourner wears to show the family and friends that they're in the period of mourning, and so they should be approached with love and sympathy. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam dayan emet. Blessed you, our Lord our God, Judge of truth. Esainai el harim, me'ayin yavo ezri. Esainai el harim, me'ayin yavo ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai, Oseh Shemayim va'aretz, Ezri me'im Adonai, Oseh Shemayim va'aretz. The psalmist wrote long ago in those words, I lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian. God is your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm. God will guard your soul, your going and coming, now and forever. What is the measure of a man? His measure is the kind words people say when he isn't there, and the memories he creates that stay indelible in the minds of all who knew him. What is the measure of a man? It is the amount of love he leaves in people's hearts and the laughter he leaves upon people's lips. What is the measure of a man? It is the length of time he is remembered, his good deeds, and his kind words. Measured in the length of years, stories of his best moments and loving kindness get told by family and loved ones alike. Richard would hate this, but at the same time, if we didn't make a fuss, he'd pick on us too. Richard accomplished so much in his lifetime. He was a force to be reckoned with in his 72 years of life. He loved being great at his work, fencing with words to prove he was right. He loved arguing points so much that sometimes he would argue one side of an argument and then change viewpoint just to see if he could win arguing the other side of the discussion. He held the moments surrounded by all of us closest to his heart. He led by example and invited us all to join him on his adventures filled with laughter and merriment. Today we celebrate Richard's life, even as we grieve his absence and death. Richard did his best to leave us with as many memories and as much laughter as he could to sustain us in his absence. Loving husband for over 21 years to Laurel, a blessed memory. Son of the late Jack and Leatrice, both a blessed memory. Brother of Bradley and Bonnie, both a blessed memory. And father to Zach and Dana, friend to so many. We are blessed with the lives we share. May Richard's memory always be a blessing as we celebrate who he was and all he added to our lives. In the film Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium, Dustin Hoffman's character says, when King Lear dies in Act 5, do you know what Shakespeare has written? He's written, he dies. That's all and nothing more. No fanfare, no metaphor, no brilliant final words. The culmination of the most influential work of dramatic literature is, he dies. It takes Shakespeare, a genius, to come up with these words. And yet every time I read those two words, I find myself overwhelmed with dysphoria. And I know it's only natural to be sad, but not because of the words, he dies, but because of the life we saw prior to the words. I've lived all 5 of my acts, and I'm not asking you to be happy that I must go. I'm only asking that you turn the page, continue reading, and let the next story begin. And if anyone asks what became of me, you relate my life and all its wonder, and end it with a simple and modest, he died. A poet wrote, "If you are reading this, then I must be gone. Remember me true, my good days and bad, although I hope our memories hold more smiles than pain. Remember the days filled with laughter, so that your tears may hold some sweetness and less sorrow. I never claimed perfection, although I'm still convinced I was right most of the time. But please forgive me those moments when I couldn't admit I was wrong. I tried to fit so much in what felt like so little time. Life is built day upon day, where memories accumulate like fallen leaves in autumn. We keep only the most special and colorful ones, while the rest are swept away and forgotten. I'm so blessed for all my days you filled with so much color. If this is being read, and I'm off elsewhere never to return, remember my love for you more than anything else, because in the end, that is all that matters most." The Byrds made famous these words of Ecclesiastes when they sang that there's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak. And now is the time we speak of Richard Sorman's incredible life, as I invite up his son Zach to say some words about his father.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see all of your faces. For those of you on Zoom should note the crowd is standing room only, of which my dad would very strongly approve. Oh, thanks. So just to be clear, for anyone who had money on it, we will be setting a supplemental Shiva at the Horseshoe Casino in Hammond at some point soon to be determined. And if you didn't laugh at that joke, you also might be at the wrong funeral, so now might be the time to step away. Because it doesn't get any better from here. So before I get into all of it, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of you. Those of you who are here, and those of you who took a moment to comment, share a thought, say something, do something. It really means a lot. Just to me, and I know it does to my sister, in really truly understanding who my dad was and putting his life into context. And it does. Funerals are awkward and no one ever knows what to say. But let me assure you, every little bit helps and is much appreciated. Also, he wouldn't approve of me looking at my notes so frequently, but I'm doing it my way to make sure I get it right. Had I been prescient enough to ask my dad what his perfect eulogy would be before he died, it would have gone something like this. Billionaire philanthropist Richard J Sorman died peacefully this morning with perfectly straight hair. Shortly before he passed, he experienced the perfect shoe at the blackjack table, winning every single hand he played and bankrupting the casino. After this triumphant victory, he flew by helicopter to the world's largest yacht, which he owned, where he realized it just doesn't get any better than this. I wish that was the eulogy I was here to give today, but I'm not. So I'm just going to tell you a few things about my dad as I remember him. And I think it's the way he'd want to be remembered. First of all, he was a great storyteller. So great, in fact, that he was the one that usually spoke at funerals. So this is my first attempt at it, and I really hope I do him proud. But it wasn't just finding the right words of comfort that would give others peace. My dad's real talent was in telling jokes. And I remember even as a kid, when he was telling jokes that were way above my head, I always knew when to laugh because he told them just right. And always hit the punchlines just right. I later realized what some of those jokes actually meant and had confused feelings about it. My dad was also remarkably honest, which is a way of putting things delicately. If he had something to say, he was going to say it. And not just when he was asked. Usually, mostly when people would have preferred that he kept his thoughts to himself. But he never pulled any punches, and he always told it like it was. I think one of my favorite things to remember about my dad and pass on is the way that he just found ways to create incremental joy in life through whatever means he could. In a normal situation, he could just make it a little bit easier by telling a joke or doing something silly and making it a little better. He also liked to create joy by spending money. If you're happy, spend some money to make something a little bit better, get a trophy to commemorate it. If you're sad, spend some money. Get some things that'll make you feel better. And I know because it fucking works. Pardon my language. I don't know what everyone's views on the afterlife are, but I know that if my dad was here today, he would have very mixed feelings about the fact that I am wearing his cufflinks and his watch, and that my tie, while is purple, is not exactly the correct color purple, but it's close. It's also going to come as no surprise to most of you here that my dad was very stubborn. He did things his way and in his time. And once his mind was made up, there was no changing it, except as Rabbi Michael noted, when he did so for sport. And so many of you might be thinking about the last few years and how perhaps you weren't as close with him during that time as you were previously. And that's not because of you. That's the way he wanted it. He did things on his own terms. And as his health began to decline and my kippah continues to fall, he pushed people away so that they wouldn't see him as he was when he was sick and remember him the way he was when he was at his best. And he died the same way, on his own terms and in a way that worked for him and when he was ready to go. And he was ready. As Rabbi Michael mentioned, my dad's parents passed away and his siblings have passed away. So there's no one really here who can tell you about his childhood. He never spoke about it much with me, mostly because I think he had a tough childhood and those memories were tough. I won't tell you about his college years. I'll leave that to John to tell at his discretion, because I've heard some of those stories and they're disgusting. I also don't know much about his early adulthood, except I know that after he graduated from Wisconsin, he got a master's degree in education and taught for a while in New York and was married at a young age before he divorced and moved to Chicago to start a new life, which is where he began law school. But here's some things I can't tell you. My dad loved being a lawyer. He'd never say the words directly. But as I've followed in his footsteps, I've learned to notice a thing or two over time. And that for lawyers, there are a lot of people that have their lawyer hat that they put on when they go to work and they take off when they leave work. And then they just live their lives as normal people in those hours. My dad didn't wear hats. It was not his thing. He was a lawyer 24/7. At the dinner table, at the casino, everywhere. So for me as a child, if I ever wanted anything from my dad, I had to prove my case. I remember when I asked him once for $20 to go to a movie, he asked me how I arrived at that number. At which point I explained to him the cost of the movie, the cost of concessions for the movie, which I know he would have deemed as essential to the movie-going experience, and other associated costs that form the basis of my request. I didn't know it at the time, but I do now. This was litigation training 101. Also, as a side note, for those of you who are here and because you're here supporting me and didn't know him very well, it kind of explains a lot, doesn't it? And while I think my dad was a great lawyer, in these circumstances, he was not the fairest of judges. My dad's favorite story to tell about my childhood was once when we went into the smoke shop after having brunch at Max's Deli. And I was going through a temporary childhood pyromaniac phase. It's over now, we're okay. And I asked him to buy me a lighter. And he said, no. I said, why? And he said, because I said so. And as my dad tells the story, I squared my feet, put my hands on my hips, and said, Dad, based on our respective levels of intelligence, I think I'm entitled to a better answer than because I said so. At which point he stood there flabbergasted, and another patron of the store turned to him and said, excuse me, how old is your son? And he said, I think it's 8. I think he's 8, but now I'm just not so sure. And that's the end of his version of the story, but it's important to note that I did not, in fact, get that lighter. So later that day, I stole his, which ended very badly for me. I can also tell you that my dad loved my mother. Neither of them spoke much about their courtship, but I do know that they met through the JUF when my dad's boss at the time dragged him to an event and introduced him to my mom, who at the time was working for the JUF's Young People's Division. The JUF was always a charity that is very close to her heart. And it's why we've asked folks that instead of bringing something to the Shiva, or if you feel compelled to make a donation, you do so there. For those of you who don't know, my mom passed away 20 years ago this August. And I don't think he ever truly got over her. She was the love of his life. And I think it's truly fitting that today we'll lay him to rest here beside her the way he wanted it. Like any marriage, they had their fair share of arguments, some of which I think were entirely necessary. As in, but for my dad's firm insistence to the contrary, my sister and I would have been named Roxanne and Benji. So thanks for that one, Dad. I appreciate it. While I didn't understand it at the time, I now know that most of their arguments stemmed from the simple fact that my dad loved my mom so much, he just wanted all of her time and attention. And she was out taking care of everyone, because that's the way she was. And at its core, I think that's a really loving thing, and nice, even though it didn't always manifest that way. But I know that when it mattered the most, my dad was there for my mom and honored her wishes, even when it cost him dearly to do so. My dad also loved Irish setters, like a lot. Seriously, I took a look at his Facebook newsfeed and it's just like filled with posts from people who love Irish setters, and just, he's in like 20 groups like this, and they all just post pictures of their Irish setters and like ask each other questions about Irish setters. It's crazy. And if you come to the house later, I'll show you the cane that he had made, which is headed by a replica of an Irish setter. He was committed. In his own words, my dad had Irish setters growing up, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention our beloved Dexter, who drove him nuts for the better part of the last decade. According to my dad, in addition to being strikingly beautiful dogs, Irish setters are known for being stubborn and goofy. Speaking of stubborn and goofy, my dad also loved his kids. and we also drove him nuts. But I think, if you know my dad, he got agitated a lot and irritated a lot. But secretly, deep down inside, I think he loved it. Or at least I have to tell myself that, because most of my greatest memories of him are of me and my sister driving him nuts. So if I don't spin that positively, it would be problematic. Case in point, one of my fondest family memories was a weekend trip to Vegas, where my sister let it slip that when the two of them were spending some time together, she had figured out the perfect way to mimic Richard face, which is the face that he made when he was a little ticked off and not quite yet at the boiling point, but wanted to demonstrate that he was mad. I tried to do it and was told that I never got it quite right, but it was a little something like this. With the smacking of the tongue gesture and kind of chewing on his tongue. And after my sister let it slip that she did it just right, we turned Richard face upside down, and we all started rolling with laughter. So when we said something that was intended to needle him, my sister would cut him off at the pass and start making the face. And then I would make the face and he told me I was doing it wrong, and then we'd all laugh. If you knew my dad while I was growing up, you probably know that he and I had a rough go of it. In fact, if you told him 20 years ago that I'd be the one standing up here delivering his eulogy, he probably would have given you a terse half smile and said something patronizing like, "I hope you're right." One reason for this struggle, in his words, was something called the Sorman family curse. Apparently, some time ago, in a candid moment with his mother, she cursed him, saying, "May you marry a woman who cannot cook or clean and have children who are exactly like you." After marrying my mother, who most certainly could not cook or clean, my dad became acutely aware of that curse. And so, when he had a son, me, he was worried that I would grow up to be just like him, and that we would have the same difficult relationship that he had with his father. So much so that he told me that it was difficult for him to hold me as a baby because he was worried about getting close to me. And so we struggled a lot for a long time when I was a kid. One contributing factor was that I was diagnosed as an adolescent with oppositional defiant disorder, which, at least in my case, could alternatively been described as pre-law syndrome. But I think the real reason that we struggled a lot was that I dealt with the same issues that he did when he was a kid. And it scared him that I would continue to struggle in the ways that he did as an adult. But even through all these struggles, eventually we got there. I think the turning point happened somewhere in 2005. It was during my sophomore year of Brandeis. I was extremely unhappy, and I felt like I wasn't at the right school. So I planned to transfer to Indiana University and came home in about February and was planning to start up again in the fall semester. During that time, I had the best job ever, getting paid cash under the table, working at a local mom and pop video store where my friend was the manager, and we just watched movies and smoked pot all day. My dad was not happy about it. Well, I think he didn't really actually have a problem with the pot part. He cared about the hours that I was keeping and the mess that I consistently made throughout his house. And admittedly, during that time, I probably did not come off as the most upstanding member of society. Finally, one evening, he had reached his boiling point and couldn't hold it in any longer. And he did something that was considered a typical dad move, but was not usually in his playbook. He said to me, "Zachary, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed and really concerned because I think you're never going to go back to college and you're just going to be a college dropout and never make something of yourself." And while I don't think it was his intention at the time, it turned out to be the single greatest parenting pep talk in my entire life. Hearing his doubt that I would pull myself out of this rut, triggered something inside of me. And so as my own personal way of saying fuck you, I immediately changed my start date from the fall to summer school and started at Indiana University, where I graduated with the highest honors at the top of my class with a 3.97 GPA. To which he responded, "What's the matter, dumbass? Couldn't get a 4.0?" And just like that, what was once a difficult father-son story turned right on its head. For the 2 years after college and before I started law school, I lived with him while I worked for a law firm downtown. And we went from Zach and Richard, fierce combatants, to best friends. During that time, we would frequently carpool to and or from work and would often eat together. And when I had my first back surgery in 2009, he was there for me every step of the way, helping me get back on my feet. We also shared a lot of great times during that period, including a week-long visit from my dad's younger brother, Bradley, and his wife, Tamara, where the nights typically ended with Sorman family bong hits and a lot of great laughter. We got along so well during that time that after I graduated law school, he made a fairly persuasive pitch for me to come back and live with him. Because in his words, it would help me repay my student loans faster. While I politely declined, feeling that working long hours and commuting to and from Highland Park would be a bit too much, my dad, in his typical fashion, refused to take no for an answer and proceeded to have a triple bypass surgery. So I stayed with him a few months longer, helping him get back on his feet. Although I did eventually leave the nest, for the last 9 years, we continue to have a great relationship, highlighted by great trips to New Orleans, Napa Valley, and finally Barcelona in 2019. And it was during this trip, which was funded by one of my epic wins at the boat, as opposed to one of his, we had a really nice chat where we acknowledged this amazing transformation in our relationship, and we realized the Sorman family curse wasn't actually a curse at all. It was a blessing. Sure, my mom couldn't cook or clean, but she was perhaps the best thing that happened to him. And the fact that I turned out to be just like him was a close runner-up. So, for two people that spent decades arguing about every little thing, I think it's fitting that on this we agreed. Thank you.
I invite lifelong friend Rick Weil to say a few words.
Bet Rabbi Michael was worried that Zach wouldn't have much to say. You can go on, can't you? No, that's quite all right, because Richard would have loved to have heard it. And I think it's wonderful that we're saying the real things about Richard, because I hate coming to these, sitting down and then wondering if I'm at the right funeral when I hear a pillar of the community, a loving husband, a fantastic father, and I go, oh, I know a mumser and a ganef. I don't know what I'm doing here. So please, remember Richard as he was, because Richard was unique. He was who he was, when he was, and he was happy being Richard. I'll play the hard 6/8 in a minute. Anytime I'm standing near him, he figures we got the come out rolling. I love traveling with Richard. I love going with Richard. The funnier part was half the people in Vegas thought Richard and I were lovers because we always showed up together. Our wives never came. And one time the casino host said to me, you know, you don't have to take separate rooms. It's Vegas. You live with it. You enjoy it. Richard was a panic. I met him under the strangest circumstances. His wife Laurel, my wife Lori. He's Richard. I'm Richard. We both had sons named Zach at the same place at the same age. So we were confused a lot by the schools, by the city even. But my favorite was that Skokie Valley Cleaners, which I thought was the greatest cleaners in the world because I'd send them a $50 shirt. I get back a $200 shirt. And I'm like, this is just fantastic. I love them. So one day, Richard was complaining to me about this horrible laundry that he had. He said, they lose everything. I said, oh, that's terrible. Realizing that every shirt I had was his. Hey, those are the breaks, Richard. I told him about it years later when it didn't fit either of us anymore, but that was okay. But it had, RJS. I just curled them this way. So this one might also, I don't know. Anyway, we had a wonderful relationship that started this way. Lori and Laurel knew each other, and they arranged for Richard and I to get together at a cocktail party. I was in a terrible place, terrible mood. I was working with someone I knew was just thieving from me, and I didn't know what to do about it because he was a friend, but I was getting stressed. And we're at the party. I was horrible. I didn't talk. I said hi to Richard for 2 seconds and went in a corner. I got home. Lori just wanted to kill me. She goes, "This is my friend Laurel, and you're going to get to know her husband, and you're going to be nice, and you're going to apologize." So I called him the next morning, and I told him, "Look, I'm in a bad place, and I'm sorry for my behavior last night." And he said, "Well, what can I do for you?" I said, "Nothing. I need a real son of a bitch. That's all." He goes, "I'll be there in 15 minutes. And he was. And he came over, he straightened everything out, won the case in 2 months, became my closest and dearest friend for the last 35 years, was a friend to my children, was a friend to my wife, was open about anything they needed. If they had a problem, they came to him. If they needed some of his expertise, he gave it to them. When he heard my son Zach was going to UIC and was looking for a job, he hired him. He just said, "Oh, come on." And I don't think my kid's made that much money since. But he said, he quit. I said, "Why would you quit? Richard's wonderful. He pays you well. What's the problem?" He goes, "Oh, it's so sad. Everybody yells there." Well, yeah, Richard yells. It is loud, but that was him. We adored him, and I'll miss him as much as I would miss anybody in this world, because the things we shared that we didn't say out loud were probably louder and more important than the things we did say out loud. We could communicate with each other just by looking. We knew what was on the other one's mind, and we loved cheering the other one on. My last piece was when he called me one day. I was out at Argonne. I was working there, and he goes, "You got to come into the city. You got to be here at 1 o'clock. I go, "I can't just walk out. There's security here. There's people. They're serious. We do work. You got to be here at 1 o'clock in courtroom," whatever the number was. I said, "What's going on?" He goes, "I'm doing a cross-examination. I don't want you to miss it." He goes, "It's going to be great." So somehow I got out of there, and I went to, there I am sitting. And every time the opposing counsel would say something, Richard would object. It didn't matter if he said, "What's the temperature?" I object. And the judge would say, "Mr. Sorman, sit down, please. We're going to get on with this." Guy would start to talk. Richard would go, "I object." And I object, and I object, until the judge was screaming at the top of his lungs. And I'm going, "Where's the cross-examination? What the heck is this show?" And all of a sudden the judge says, "I'm going to impose sanctions." And Richard turns to me. Now I know why he wanted me. Turns to me and he goes, "You brought your checkbook, right?" Clip me. But that was the price of admission with Richard. As I said, you got to love him, because he never changed, and he never pretended to be anything he wasn't. You knew who he was when you had him. And if you came back for more, shame on you if you didn't like it. So we're here one more time, Mr. Richard. Good luck.
It wasn't that I was so worried about Zach or Rick. When you have such a large character as Richard, and you maybe have 3 sentences in your book, you worry a little. Of course, that's why I go first. This is the worst part of my job. Standing before the grave of a dear friend who has died too young, leaving so many conversations unspoken. Richard and I have been friends for over 10 years. He was one of my greatest champions and biggest supporters whenever I needed him the most. We passed many an hour together just passing stories back and forth, making each other laugh in hopes of preventing our mutual grief from making us cry. He truly took the time to get to know me, as well as give me the gift of letting me into his life and his experiences. As a litigator, Richard saw himself as a modern-day gladiator in battle against inferior foes who needed to be vanquished for the good of his clients. While he dreaded coming before some judges, there were just as many judges who dreaded when Richard came before them. But woe be his opponents who ever underestimated Richard and his expertise. No lawyer ever made that mistake twice. Richard was larger than life, a giant of a teddy bear who could cut steel with his laser gaze if someone stepped wrong towards him or anyone he cared about. Richard loved traveling, especially to Vegas, where his mind often conquered the blackjack tables, leaving the casino staggering without understanding what just had happened to them. Richard loved living life, being surrounded by friends and family, and experiencing everything the world had to offer. We find ourselves here too soon, as Richard's health began to betray him a little less than 5 years ago. He hated getting old. He hated watching his beloved Dexter age with him, and was devastated when Dexter died. Richard hated being seen in his weakened state, as Zach stated, and pushed so many of us away to hide his frailty from those of us who loved him no matter what. In the end, it was only a blessing that after his fall, he didn't suffer long and found his way of letting go of his ailing body to find freedom in the world to come, hopefully reunited with his beloved Laurel and Dexter among so many. When we die, we release all the pain and suffering holding us in this world. When we die, we hope only our best memories live on with those we love the most. In living, we all try to make the world a better place. We try to raise children that better the world. We try to make a difference wherever we go. Richard made a difference. We are all his legacy. He loved sharing his life with us and sharing many laughs throughout the years. May we always remember the best of Richard in his strength and health, and may his memory always be a blessing, as he was such a blessing in all of our lives. A poet wrote, "Fight my fight. Dry your tears and pick up the mantle I've left you. Fight my fight for those in need and for those who never had a me to share their lives. Fight my fight by caring for the stranger, the sick, the silent, the victim, the child, the one who has no one else to come to their side and defend them from the world. Fight my fight because it is the right thing to do. Take my love for you and share it with the rest of the world in hopes of filling it up with a love so big that you find every person in the world standing by your side as a defender of all that is good. May you all fill the world with the light I've always tried to share with every person I've known or loved. My hand may not be in yours, but know that my spirit lives in your heart, and my light can never be extinguished as long as memories of me give you the strength you need to fight my fight." We continue reading together in the pamphlet, the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We continue with El Malei Rachamim, the memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Amse Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Torim, Kizohara Mazirim, Et Nishmat Ish Shel Ben Adonai, Shalach Lolamo, Baal Rachamim Yasterehu, V'Seiter Kanafav Lolamim, Vitzor Bitzor HaChaim Et Nishmato, Adonai hu nachlato, ve'adnuach b'shalom, al mishkavo v'nomar amen. Compassionate God, eternal spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Richard Sorman, who has entered eternity. God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence in the shadow of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. We continue with the mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrach chirotev yamlich malchoteh, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayedechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kariv v'maru, Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam olamei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei rekurusha barichu, Le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, dameran be'alma v'maru, Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'maru, Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'yimaru, amen. May God grant peace to those who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved as we say together, amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, the gentlemen from the cemetery are going to lower his casket into the grave. And after they place the cover of the vault, anyone who wishes to place earth into the grave, you may. The tradition is to place 3 measures of earth without handing the shovel from person to person. Everyone is invited to the Sorman residence at 1906 Berkeley Road in Highland Park till 6 p.m. And memorial contributions in his memory to the Jewish United Fund would be appreciated. For those of you who are here, that information is on the service folder. For those of you who are joining us online, that information is on our website. At this time, we are going to stop the live stream. It will be an intimate experience for the family to place earth into the grave. And at this time, the rabbi is going to place earth from Israel into the grave, and then we'll turn off the live stream.
We pray silently as I chant several psalms during the lowering and the vaulting.